Order. I will call Luke Taylor to move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. Can I remind other members that they may only make a speech with prior permission from the member in charge of the debate and the Minister. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debates. Order. Order. Luke Taylor to move the motion.
Yeah. I'm just looking up the title of the debate. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's an absolute pleasure to serve under your chairship for the first time. This morning, members present may have caught the same package on the breakfast news that I did. It followed Ukrainians on the outskirts of Kyiv who have been without heating for more than 2 weeks. They've suffered in conditions unthinkable to those of us in modern Britain, with temperatures dropping to -20 overnight in some places. The pictures were heartbreaking. Children with frozen faces wearing 4 or 5 coats, grandmothers slipping on sheets of ice forming on top of the flooring of their apartment. So I hope the Chamber will indulge me in making this aside at the start of my remarks today, because as I watched those scenes, I couldn't help but feel something alarming. It's a sense that Russia's targeting of Ukrainian energy infrastructure mirrors the shockwave that they've willfully sent across Europe's traditional energy mix since they first crossed the Ukrainian border nearly 4 years ago. These shockwaves that were only amplified in the UK when they collided with the unstable economic foundations wrought by Liz Truss's mini-budget, and for which we still see the impacts rumbling on today. We're unfortunate in this country, well, we are fortunate in this country to not suffer temperatures consistently way below zero. And we're especially lucky to not have to contend with all of this whilst bombs rain down on our heads. But the reality of the dangers of the cold is present everywhere, and our cost of energy crisis is forcing people to live without heating mere miles from where we stand today, in this, the world's 6th largest economy. And it's always innocent, ordinary people from Kyiv to Kilburn and everywhere in between who suffer because of these huge energy price shocks. Ordinary people like the pensioners I see in my constituency of Sutton and Cheam, who are genuinely living with homes that look sealed shut against the winter. Their windows are boarded up with blankets and towels as they try desperately to keep what little heat they can afford inside. I mentioned in the Chamber last week a recent incident where I knocked on the door of a resident who answered the door in a coat and scarf, and it wasn't because she was going out, it was because she did not have the heating on inside, and I think it was about 3 or 4 degrees outside. And that happened again yesterday when I was canvassing in Worcester Park. I've heard from households now avoiding using their ovens, not out of choice but out of fear of what switching it on will do to their finances. And I know that local hospitals prepare for an influx a few days after cold snaps because the cold weather thickens the blood and causes clots and heart attacks in older people. Anyone here who's experienced true cold, that awful, core-shaking cold, can only dare to imagine what it feels like for children and older people whose temperature regulation is developing or fading. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition estimated that 4,950 excess winter deaths in the UK were caused by living in cold homes during that first chaotic winter of 2022-23. Yeah, absolutely.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Now, over 6,000 households in my constituency of Manchester Resham are living in a fuel poverty. The Warm House plan will deliver targeted support for those living in fuel-poor households, providing them with the means to upgrade their homes with insulation, solar panels and heat pumps. So does the honourable member agree that we should prioritise measures which improve energy efficiency and sustainability to cut fuel bills for years to come?
Absolutely. I thank the honourable member for his intervention. I'll come on to the mention of the package was outlined by the government last week. Very welcome to see, but we need to go further on immediate measures. We know that there are over 12 million households today struggling with high energy bills. But it's not just the cold, it's what creeps in with it. It's the damp and the mould in children's lungs. It's the reliance for some families on heating that produces dangerous carbon monoxide, which presents a threat to life and limb. But let's be clear, in parts of Britain where fuel poverty is all too common, we're at risk of letting one generation slip away slowly, sitting lonely in their homes, shivering, whilst we raise another forever stunted by a cold childhood. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I commend Sutton and Cheam for bringing this forward? It affects everywhere in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Around 39 to 40% of households in Northern Ireland are classified as living in fuel poverty, meaning they must spend more than 10% of their income on energy just to keep their homes warm. The stats are significantly above historic measures, and many working families don't qualify for assistance from the government. So the Honourable Gentleman is right to say that government must do more. Does the Honourable Member agree that very little action has been taken to ease the pressure on working families, and that more must be done to enable thresholds to make them eligible for support and assistance?
I thank the Honourable Member for his contribution, and I think he highlights that gap between where families are eligible for support and those that just can't quite make ends meet. And clearly there is a challenge to make any measure completely comprehensive and ensure those who are in need get the support that they need. When Beveridge wrote of his 5 great evils all those decades ago, he specifically had in mind the kind of poverty that we were talking about here, not just in material terms, but in terms of the access to living conditions that make a higher quality of life possible. In the decades since, we've clung to the findings of his report, while slowly letting the meaning of the words decay, assuming that things like freezing to death in your own home was an evil conquered by the white heat of revolution. But we were wrong, and squalor, by means of poor housing, insulation and warmth, is back again in Britain. It is here, not just in the homes of the poorest and the most vulnerable, but all too often in suburban houses of middle-income families and urban flats where young people raise kids. And that is to say nothing of the parts of rural Britain where very old, pre-modern insulation in housing is still the norm. For too many families and pensioners I meet, across neighbourhoods, ages and even incomes, this is the single most pressing issue in their lives. We don't need a new Beveridge report to tell us that. Not that we are wanting for heartbreaking statistics. We can see it with our own eyes and ears and feel it in our bones when we knock on doors in our constituencies time and time again, day in, day out. When an issue gets to the heart of people's quality of life in such a huge way, the state has a duty to cut through the roadblocks, take the lead and do something about it quickly. But this government has taken too long to do so. The announcement last week of the Warm Home Strategy is welcome and something we Liberal Democrats have been pushing for years. I know that many organisations working in this space, like the MCS Foundation, are relieved to see it finally outlined. But as... absolutely, yeah.
As somebody who suffers enormously from the cold, as anyone can see from my hands, they're already white, I really do appreciate the Honourable Member for bringing forward this point. And the Warm Home Scheme is incredibly welcome, but worrying in the order with which it suggests interventions. The idea that we should be putting solar panels and heat pumps before insulation and airtightness worries me, having spent 25 years in the building industry. I'm also very concerned about the use of specific technologies rather than aims. The real solution needs to be cutting the cost of heating our homes. And there are innovative solutions such as the Luthmore electric boiler, which is an innovative firm in my own constituency, which allows for something to take away a gas boiler and plug it straight in. Because otherwise we are at risk of pandering to those that can afford to put these measures in, and the most vulnerable will actually be left exactly where they are in damp homes. And I assume the member agrees with me.
I wholeheartedly agree. As an engineer by background, we need to be focusing on the outcome and the goal rather than necessarily prejudicing the tool. And whilst air source heat pumps are suitable in many occasions, it does rely on air tightness, it does rely on insulation, which may well be a barrier to quick implementation. We on this benches have been calling for a 10-year emergency home upgrade programme, starting with free insulation and heat pumps for those on low incomes.
On that point.
Absolutely.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. A constituent of mine was having energy refit work done by Consumer Energy Solutions. Under the Eco4 scheme, which seeks to lower heating costs, that firm recently went into administration and the work will now not be finished. The Eco4 scheme has been extended, but the government has not clearly committed to introducing better protections for customers. Does my honourable friend agree with me that the government urgently needs to assure greater consumer protections against installers' incompetence and incompletions?
Absolutely 100% agree. Whenever we have novel technologies, We do have a rush to fill the space, and unfortunately cowboys may well get there first, and government does have a huge role, not only in encouraging quality installation, but also protecting against that vacuum that is filled by, unfortunately, disreputable traders. Talking about the home upgrade programme, as with most Liberal Democrat policies, we urge the government to steal it. It would complement and frankly complete their own strategy. And I'd invite the Minister to take this opportunity to outline specifically how the delivery of that strategy will work, because we as Liberal Democrats have said, without a clear replacement for the Eco programme or the Future Home Standard, we face losing skilled installers and long delays for the kind of ambitious programme of insulation that we need. But this isn't a theoretical loss. Homes with lower efficiency standards are actively dangerous to people's health. So we will hold the government accountable for their legally binding targets, but I'd encourage them to remember that full disclosure of the practicalities of implementing the strategy would help all of us work harder to tackle fuel poverty. In fact, the government should be working more closely with new projects like the CityGen network that I recently visited in London, or with local councils like my own in Sutton, to see how new alternative heat sources are already making a difference to people's lives. But we can and we must be more ambitious. We surely must recognise now that the scale of the crisis is so severe that tinkering with infrastructure investment, while useful for the future, does not solve the problem for families shivering and cutting back every single day. To genuinely rescue people from the cold, we must tackle the real cost of energy now. That's why we need a social tariff, to provide targeted energy discounts for vulnerable households, including those on low incomes and households in receipt of PIP. And it's why the Liberal Democrats have been calling for the renewables obligation levy to be removed from people's energy bills and instead funded by a proper windfall tax until April 2027, after which the government should develop a new way of funding RO contracts, implementing Liberal Democrat proposals to move them onto the contracts for difference model. This decouples energy prices from the wholesale gas prices and ensures ordinary people across the country can benefit from cheap renewable energy. Indeed, I'm sorry not to see any members of Reform Party here. Not a surprise. It was written down here. We knew it was going to be the case. Because they do deserve to be told once again that net zero does not mean higher energy costs. How we fund our energy transition is a political choice. And they're choosing to remain wedded to the very system that has left us so vulnerable and left Britons literally freezing to death in their own homes, rather than make sure that the fat cats pay their fair share towards keeping people in this country alive.
Will the honourable member give way?
Absolutely.
I'm grateful. In addition to the absence of Reform UK MPs, what's striking is the absence of Conservative MPs too. And of course, it was during the Truss Kwarteng mini-budget that the borrowing was pushed up by 60 billion pounds because of the energy price guarantee that was a consequence of government dependence on Russian gas. So does he agree with me that really what we need in this country is energy independence, so that we have energy security and we can be the custodians of our own destiny?
I could not agree more. Energy security is national security. It sounds like a trite cliche, but it's so absolutely true when we look at the dangers around the world today. The Minister has heard my arguments and the arguments made by other colleagues who have intervened and will have seen, like the rest of us, the findings of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, published earlier today, that the number of people living in the most extreme form of poverty has reached its highest level since records began. So I asked them, in addition to my other asks this afternoon, to simply look us in the eye and tell us why, when people are freezing, why they are not moving faster. Thank you.
I want to thank the Honourable Member from Sutton and Cheen for bringing this debate. Very important. I have seen firsthand how urgent the cost of living pressures are for many of my residents. And just last week, I hosted a cost of living coffee morning in my community, bringing together energy providers, water companies, banks and local support groups. It was a practical example of how joined-up accessible support can make a real difference to residents in Portsmouth, particularly when people are helped to understand what they're entitled to and how they can access alternatives. And I want to say a huge thank you to all who attended, be they residents or stakeholders, including Advice Portsmouth, Centrica, British Gas, Hive Portsmouth, Income Max, Octopus Energy, Nationwide, Switched On Portsmouth, Portsmouth Water, the Energy Ombudsman, Eon Next, Utilitas, Southern Water and Nat West Bank. This drop-in highlighted so many issues, and that, Madam Chair, is why I welcome the Government's excellent Warmer Homes plan, a plan that will improve energy efficiency, reduce energy bills, cut carbon emissions and tackle fuel poverty throughout a mix of grants, loans and local delivery and updating of standards. However, it is important to recognise it is vital to it's vital because so many times consumers have been let down by previous governments and by rogue tradies, that we actually think about trust in this. And that is why I've been meeting with Checkatrade, the Department of Business and Trade and the sector to ensure that our tradies' reputations aren't let down by cowboy builders and shoddy outfits when we bring about the reality of our Warmer Homes plan. So what I'd like to ask the Minister, while I welcome the Warmer Home plan warmly, I would like to ask the Minister to outline how this plan will build trust and how it will complement local community-led initiatives to ensure energy bill support and home efficiency measures meet the people of Portsmouth's needs.
Minister McCluskey.
Thank you, Ms Jardine, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I think for the first time. I think we could probably have done with a longer debate, given how many people intervened at the start, but I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Sutton and Cheam for securing this debate and giving us the opportunity this afternoon to debate an important issue that I know that lots of members across the House have an interest in. And can I just at the outset associate myself with the remarks that he made about the situation in Ukraine last year when I attended the G7 Energy Ministers meeting. I met with the Ukrainian Energy Minister at the time and was struck by the sheer scale of what she was facing every day, sending energy workers into the field to repair broken transmission lines, to repair substations, not just facing the risks that any worker faces in those kind of situations with high voltage cables, but also facing the risk of Russian drone attacks and Russian bombs. And I couldn't be clearer in condemning the actions of the Russian regime and what they're doing in targeting infrastructure at this present time. As I draw this debate to a close, I want to start by reaffirming that tackling the affordability crisis is this government's #1 priority. And the main reason that bills are so high, as the Honourable Member for Sutton and Cheam alluded to, is the wholesale cost of gas and our exposure to price shocks caused by our dependence on fossil fuel markets. We are working to bring down for good the cost of energy by taking back control of our energy system through our clean energy superpower mission, and thanks to our decisions last year was a record year for wind and solar power, and we've embarked on the biggest nuclear building programme for half a century. And already in 2026, the government's 7th contracts for difference auction secured an incredible 8.4 gigawatts of new offshore wind capacity across Britain. That's enough to deliver energy for more than 12 million British homes. This is what it means to deliver on lower bills, good jobs and energy security. And I have to look at the benches opposite, which are empty this afternoon, and think about the work that they could have been doing in government over the past 14 years to take us to a position where we would have been less reliant on fossil fuels and not facing the kind of fuel shocks that, I suppose, on that basis, it's not a surprise they didn't turn up to defend their record. Energy bills, notwithstanding the concerns raised by honourable members, which I share across the House this afternoon, are starting to come down. In real terms, Ofgem's price cap was lower in 2025 than 2024, but we know we need to go further. And that's why the government's intervention at last year's budget is going to help people deal with the cost of living pressures by taking an average £150 off costs of energy bills from this April. Through closing the ECO scheme and providing exchequer funding to reduce the cost of the renewables obligation for domestic energy suppliers, this government is turning a corner by putting more money in people's pockets in 2026. And at this point, I just want to address the point made by the honourable gentleman, the member for Yeovil, who raised the issue of an eco project in affecting one of his constituents. I would ask him to send me that case in writing so that we can investigate it. Fully. In addition to the £150 off of energy costs, we've expanded the warm home discount scheme this year, so more households will benefit from its support. This means up to 6 million households will receive a £150 rebate on their energy bills this winter. In Sutton and Cheam, over 2,800 households received the warm home discount last winter, and we would expect that to increase significantly this year. Under the expansion across London, for example, 950,000 households will benefit from the warm home discount this winter. That's money that's going onto people's energy bills, into their accounts now. And I recognise how important that support is to households across Britain over the winter months, and that's why we've proposed continuing the warm home discount scheme for a further 5 years up to winter 2030-2031. A number of members have raised the warm homes plan, and I'll address some of the issues that were raised during the debate in a moment. And the honourable gentleman said we needed an ambitious plan, and that is precisely what I believe the warm homes plan that we announced last week was, because reducing bills isn't just about bill discounts, whether that's £150 off of costs or the warm home discounts. It's also about transforming an ageing building stock into comfortable low-carbon homes that are cheaper to heat and fit for the future. As my honourable friend, the member for Manchester Rusholm, highlighted before he left, the warm homes plan is a vital step in this government's mission to address the long-term issue of energy affordability in the country. It is the biggest ever public investment in home upgrades, and the plan will help millions of households to benefit from solar panels, batteries, heat pumps and insulation. And the honourable lady, the member for Chippenham, talked about the priority put on different measures. I'd just like to reassure her that we are not suggesting that insulation isn't important, and I'm sure she's read the Warm Homes Plan, but she will have seen the pages in the Warm Homes Plan that deal specifically with insulation. Insulation plays an especially important part of the local government schemes that we are running, and obviously with the offer of consumer loans, the work that we're doing with finance organisations, there will be an opportunity to enable finance to retrofit homes as well. But she highlighted herself how technology is changing. She talked about the electric boiler, which I've actually seen myself, and we have been looking at lots of different technologies that could deliver. We've already made changes, for example, to the boiler upgrade scheme, which is now offering heat batteries and air-to-air heat pumps as well as traditional heat pumps. So we're always on the lookout for new technologies. Of course.
I was aware that he had seen the boiler that I was referring to, and I think that I welcome the warm home plans immensely. One of the things that worries me slightly about it is there is that old saying of doing the same thing again and expecting a different outcome is a sign of madness. And I'm slightly concerned that one of the big failings that my colleague from Yeovil highlighted is that because of a lack of scrutiny and accountability, that the previous scheme failed to do the right things at the right time. In the Warm Homes Plan, I haven't seen anything that talks about overview to ensure that a heat pump is installed when it needs to be, when perhaps actually airtightness and insulation would be more appropriate first.
Minister McCluskey.
Thank you, Ms Sheridan. To address those points, firstly, the Warm Homes Agency, which is part of the plan, is there to provide advice and guidance to consumers from the start to the end of the retrofit journey. That is about increasing the level of advice and guidance available to people, because I understand it is a challenging thing to think about how to retrofit your home, and people need the advice and guidance to do it effectively, as she herself has noted there. And in terms of the oversight, there has been a problem in the past with oversight. We saw that with a number of the issues around the Eco4 programme. The Warm Homes Plan states clearly that we'll be consulting on the consumer protection available to consumers this year, through the course of this year. As the Minister responsible, I never want to see an issue like Eco4 ever again. And we need to make it as easy as possible. Firstly, make sure that problems don't occur in the first instance, but when they do, that there is proper, adequate redress for people, and so that there is confidence in the system, because we can't expect people to make these changes without confidence in the system. In terms of the Warm Homes Plan, it will roll out upgrades to up to 5 million homes by 2030, saving households hundreds on energy bills and helping to lift up to 1 million families out of fuel poverty by 2030. We're providing £5 billion of targeted support for low-income households who receive free-of-charge upgrades, including heat pumps, solar panels and batteries. And this includes additional funding for the very successful Warm Homes Local Grant and the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund for local authorities and social housing landlords to upgrade homes for those on low incomes and social housing. And these upgrades can save a typical household £5 £550 a year on their bills, which is a considerable saving. And alongside this, we've allocated £5 billion to a new Warm Homes Fund, almost £2 billion of which will provide low or zero interest loans. This will make it easier for more people to meet the upfront cost of upgrading their homes while benefiting from lower bills. And for those living in the private rental sector tenants account for about 30% of them live in fuel poverty. We are introducing new minimum energy efficiency standards for both the private rented sector and the social rented sector that will save renters hundreds of pounds a year and ensure they have decent, warm homes. So I'm confident that this landmark plan, which we've announced, will make people across Britain better off, secure our energy independence and do right by future generations in tackling the climate crisis. One of the effects of the affordability crisis has been increasing levels of consumer debt, which remains at record level. Reducing levels of debt helps not only those in debt, but cuts the cost of managing debt for all consumers. And I recognise the need to tackle this problem and have been working closely with Ofgem on doing so. And in November, Ofgem published an updated debt strategy setting out its near-term actions and priorities to support suppliers to reduce the level of debt in the sector. And this includes proposals for a debt relief scheme to tackle debt built up by some consumers during the energy crisis, which could reduce aggregate debt. And I just want to turn briefly to the member for Portsmouth North's comments. I commend her for arranging the coffee morning and the MG support event. I think many members are probably doing something similar at the moment. They've received a lot of support from energy suppliers and other organisations at them. On her points around her conversations with Checkatrade and around the building trade, she'll have heard my answer a moment ago about ensuring that there are high levels of consumer protection, and that's not just to protect consumers but also to protect those in the building trade who want, and any time I meet them, are asking for reliable regulation and standards that they can adhere to, because the vast majority of builders who are maintaining a high standard do not want their reputations trashed by people who maybe are not meeting such similar high standards. We also know the energy system is changing. More clean power, innovative tariffs like time of use tariffs, the growth in technologies that we've discussed during this debate like heat pumps and electric vehicles mean we need solutions that are fit for 2030 and beyond. So through the cost allocation and recovery review that Ofgem is currently conducting, they're reviewing how costs on energy bills can be recovered in the future, and it's considering factors such as efficiency, fairness, meeting our net zero commitments and ensuring growth, and how that's reflected in how we pay for our energy system. And I am very keen that that ensures that there is progressivity at the heart of the way that people pay for their energy, which goes to the point that the Honourable Member raised around a social tariff, which is something that I know a lot of honourable members would welcome. I think the one thing that I am always thoughtful about is how we make sure that that is properly targeted. And for that, we need reliable data. We've just launched a Kickstarter project with DSET, joint between DSET and DESDES, about how we accurately find reliable household income data so we can properly target any kind of energy intervention in the future. I'd be happy to discuss that with them in more detail. This is absolutely vital to ensuring energy costs and energy bills reflect the changing market. In conclusion, Ms Jardine, we are bringing energy bills down for everyone with the actions that we'll be taking in April, and we'll continue to search for further ways to do so. We're lowering bills through the delivery of the budget's bill reduction measures. We've expanded the warm home discount, and we're delivering the record-breaking Warm Homes plan. And we're working with Ofgem to future-proof how costs are managed and taking action to fund our cleaner, more secure energy system. We will achieve bill savings while taking back control with homegrown clean power, and that really is the route to cheaper energy in the long run. For every wind turbine that we turn on, for every piece of new technology, that helps us reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and reduce our reliance on gas to make sure we can get those costs down in the long run. This is the only way to protect the British people and bring down bills for good, and that is what this government's clean energy mission is all about.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered government support for consumer energy bills. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 4:30 p.m.